They say funerals bring families together. Whoever said that never met mine. Grandpa Everett's service should have been solemn, sacred even. But from the moment I walked into the chapel, I knew something was off. Everyone was dressed like they'd come straight from a boardroom. Black suits with crisp ties, designer handbags, sunglasses still on indoors. It wasn't grief in the air, it was anticipation. You could almost hear calculators clicking behind their fake tears. Aunt Lorna whispered sharply to Uncle Dean behind a hymnal. My sister, Bridget, glanced at her watch 3 times during the pastor's opening words. And Soren, my brother, kept adjusting his cufflinks, like there was a camera somewhere he needed to impress. I sat in the back. Not out of humility, just habit. I've always been the one who doesn't quite fit the picture. The unplanned one, the oops, the afterthought. When the service ended, no one lingered by the casket. No one wept. They just shifted toward the side door, where a man in a gray suit stood quietly waiting with a folder in hand. The will. I didn't even know we were doing this today. They filed into the adjacent lounge, murmuring just loud enough to be heard, real estate, stocks, liquid assets. When the lawyer nodded for the last person to enter, I had to clear my throat to get his attention. He'd nearly closed the door in my face. Inside, the room went still. The estate of Everett Hamilton, the lawyer began, smoothing a sheet of paper on the table. The total assets, including property, offshore accounts, and investment portfolios, are currently valued at $230 million. No one breathed. Bridget's eyes widened. Soren leaned back, arms crossed, like he'd always known. My father, Quentin, blinked once, then rubbed his temple like he just remembered an overdue meeting. I sat frozen. 230 million? He wore flannel shirts from yard sales. Drove the same rusted pickup since I was in middle school. He made his own coffee, instant, no cream. This made no sense. And yet, as I looked around the room, it suddenly made perfect sense to them. He told me I'd get the lake house, Bridget said, voice sharp. I was the one who visited every Sunday. That property has a commercial offer pending, Soren replied, already tapping something into his phone. There are stipulations, the lawyer began, but was quickly drowned out by voices rising like a boiling kettle. I didn't speak. I just watched. Watched as their masks slipped off, revealing greed dressed up in black. My father tried to quiet the room. Let's not argue in front of the attorney. There's a process here. But even he looked more concerned about logistics than loss. Not one person mentioned Grandpa's name. No one said he'd be missed. And me? I might as well have been a ghost. I sat back, let them claw at one another. I'd seen this before, just not this nakedly. I'd been invisible for years, but this was something else entirely. In the car afterward, the silence hit me like a wave. I stared out the windshield as Bridget laughed about dinner plans. Soren mentioned a private equity firm. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. All I could think about was my son, my boy, who was still waiting for a liver transplant. Who'd needed help for years while I juggled 2 jobs and begged for mercy from hospital clerks. We can't afford it, my mother used to say. You need to manage your choices better. Now I knew the truth. They could have helped. They just wouldn't. Grandpa always saw things others didn't. A few weeks before he died, I'd visited him in the care home. He was lucid that day, unusually sharp. He'd taken my hand and said, "Sometimes I think I raised the wrong children. But not all of them." He handed me an old photo album, wrapped in worn leather. "Protect what matters, Avery. I hadn't understood then. Now I wasn't so sure. Was this whole scene what he expected? Did he know the vultures would circle before the body cooled? I didn't cry. I drove to the grocery store, picked up orange juice, cereal, a box of clearance diapers. Life doesn't pause just because everything you believed turns out to be a lie. At home, I fed my son, bathed him, read him stories. When he fell asleep, I sat in the living room, holding the photo album. Page after page of forgotten moments, birthday cakes, backyard forts, paper airplanes. He'd saved it all. Not the valuables, not the deeds. The real stuff. Maybe he knew I'd need something to hold on to when the world turned cold. That night, I didn't join the others at the steakhouse. Didn't answer Bridget's text, "You should come." It's what Grandpa would have wanted. Really? Because nothing I saw today looked like what he would have wanted. I sat in my car outside the house, engine off, hands in my lap. "My son's on a transplant list," I whispered. "And my family just became millionaires." And not one of them even looked at me. I could have screamed. Instead, I tightened my grip on the wheel. I wouldn't ask them for help. Not again. I'd rather sleep in the car than beg. But I was watching. And I was done being quiet. I wasn't planning to drive by their house. I told myself I was headed home. That I'd take the back roads, avoid traffic. But the truth was, my hands turned the wheel without asking me. The sun was setting when I pulled up across the street. Their porch lights were already on. The driveway was full, Soren's silver Lexus, Bridget's Range Rover, and my father's old Ford still somehow running like a charm. From where I sat, the windows glowed with a kind of warmth that didn't belong to me. Inside, I could see them through the dining room bay window. The table was set, candles lit, wine glasses lifted. I recognized my mother's laugh. It cut through the glass like a knife, sharp and unfamiliar. I hadn't heard it directed at me in years. They hadn't invited me. Not even a courtesy message in the group chat. Nothing. I turned off the headlights. Stayed in the car. I didn't want them to know I was there. Didn't want to give them the satisfaction of shutting the door in my face, because this time they hadn't even bothered to close it. They just never opened it for me. Earlier in the week, I'd sent a message, "Are we doing dinner after the service?" No one replied. Not Bridget, not Soren, not even Mom with her passive-aggressive ... typing that never became words. Now I knew why. Through the window, Bridget stood with a glass of Pinot raised, giving some kind of toast. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the clink of crystal and the way Soren grinned like a man who thought he'd won something. My father lifted a bottle from the sideboard, an aged bourbon he always said was for special occasions. Not birthdays. Not holidays. Just special. I remembered my 30th. The one they forgot. I had sat in a diner with a cupcake I bought myself. No candles. Just me and Bodhi. And that old voicemail from my mother, "We've been so busy, sweetheart." This wasn't about being busy. This was deliberate. A choice. A door closed with purpose. I opened the group chat again. Scrolled through old messages. Soren talking about how the estate should be split, keep it tight. No extras. Bridget agreeing, efficiency is kindness in these moments. They weren't talking about logistics. They were talking about me. They had months to tell me about Grandpa's estate. Months to prepare a seat at the table. They didn't. Maris once told me, money doesn't change people. It just shows you who they really are. She was right. Watching them through that window, it hit me, maybe I was never really in the family. Just tolerated when convenient. Just background noise in their more important conversations. A year ago, I sat at the same house, same chairs, same smells, begging for help. Bodhi's treatment wasn't covered by insurance. We needed $185,000. My mom cried. My dad shook his head and said, "Avery, we're not made of money." But apparently, we were. Just not when I needed it. That house behind me hadn't changed. Same bricks. Same windows. But now it glowed with secrets and money and laughter I wasn't meant to hear. I told Bodhi that night, "Grandma and Grandpa just can't afford it, baby." And he believed me. Because that's what little boys do. But I knew better now. It wasn't that they couldn't help. They just didn't want to. You don't forget that kind of no. You wear it. Like a second skin. I stepped out of the car. The street was quiet, except for the distant buzz of cicadas. I walked up to the edge of the lawn, arms folded, heart pounding. The porch lights cast a soft halo on the grass, but I didn't move into them. I could see my family. Hear pieces of their joy. My legs went weak, but I didn't fall. I bit down on the inside of my cheek. Hard. For a second, I imagined storming in. Kicking open the door. Letting it all out, every ache, every betrayal, every fake smile I'd ever swallowed. But then I saw Bodhi's face in my mind. I couldn't give them that. Not the chaos. Not the meltdown they'd used to call me unstable, emotional, dramatic. No. They didn't get my fire tonight. They'd get my silence. Later, they'd get my storm. I turned away. As I walked back to the car, something caught my eye. The mailbox, slightly ajar. Just enough to show a corner of an envelope. It was old-fashioned. Cream-colored. My name in slanted cursive. I knew that handwriting. Grandpa. My breath caught. I looked back toward the house, still full of noise. No one saw me. No one noticed. I took the envelope. Slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't open it. Not yet. My hands were shaking too hard anyway. But as I pulled away from the curb, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Maybe the dead still have things to say. Maybe the living just don't want you to hear it. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. The envelope sat on the kitchen table beside a half-finished cup of coffee. I'd been staring at it for almost an hour, afraid of what it might say, or worse, what it might not. Bodhi was asleep in the next room, breathing softly through the baby monitor. Every so often, I'd look up at the light blinking on it, as if it were keeping time for me. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Grandpa Everett's, neat, deliberate, and tilted just slightly to the right. My fingers brushed the seal, rough and old, and I hesitated again. I wasn't ready for another disappointment. Not tonight. Finally, I tore it open. Inside was a folded sheet of thick stationery. The first words made my throat tighten. You were always the one who listened. The letter went on, gentle, personal, in his voice so clear I could almost hear it. He wrote about my visits, how I'd bring Bodhi, how those afternoons had kept him company when everyone else was too busy managing more important things. He wrote that he had been working with his attorney, a man named Raymond Coulter in Houston, to establish a trust fund for Bodhi's medical care. You don't need to ask anyone for help, sweetheart. This will take care of him, it read. I pressed a hand to my chest. He knew. He knew about the rejections, the bills, the nights I'd slept in my car outside the hospital. Then the tone shifted. I fear, he wrote, that some in the family may not act with the heart I raised them to have. If this letter reaches you late, something went wrong. I read that line 3 times, the words burning deeper each time. Something went wrong. The coffee had gone cold by then. I didn't move. Didn't cry. Just sat there, the letter trembling in my hands as if it carried his heartbeat. He'd trusted someone, Soren. The same Soren who'd been handling bank matters after the funeral. The same brother who'd barely looked at me while I sat in that room of greed and polished lies. Now it made sense. Grandpa had asked Soren to help, and Soren had buried it. Not Grandpa. Him. It wasn't just emotional pain anymore. It was injustice. A month before Grandpa passed, I'd visited him at the care home. He'd been tired, but his eyes were still sharp. We'd sat in the garden, watching birds fight over breadcrumbs. He'd asked me, if you had $1 million, what would you do? I laughed. Buy back time. He'd smiled in that quiet way of his. Smart answer, he'd said. Now, I realized he'd already made plans. Plans to buy back time for us, for Bodhi. And someone had stolen it. I turned to my laptop. The glow of the screen cut through the darkness. I typed Raymond Coulter, Houston attorney, into the search bar. There he was, still active, same law firm Grandpa had mentioned. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, drafting an email. I stopped halfway through, looking toward Bodhi's door. This isn't about inheritance, I whispered to myself. It's about integrity. I pulled out the old folder I kept hidden behind the fridge, medical bills, insurance denials, the letters that said we regret to inform you. I laid them out across the table, next to Grandpa's letter. For once, I wasn't shaking from fear. I was steady. I made 3 copies of the letter the next morning. One went in my glove box, one I hid inside a cookbook on the top shelf, and one I mailed to Maris, my friend from the clinic. I went to a notary downtown, paid $15 to have the documents certified. The clerk barely looked up as she stamped it, but I walked out feeling like I just claimed a piece of something that was mine. That night, I started writing things down. Dates. Texts. The words they said at the funeral. Soren's calls, Bridget's silence, my father's avoidance. It all formed a pattern, deliberate, methodical, cold. You don't forget someone like me. You erase them on purpose. I opened a voice memo app and began recording. Day 1, I said quietly. If they try to rewrite the story, I want the truth to have my voice. By the time I looked at the clock, it was close to midnight. My phone buzzed on the table, a missed call. Houston area code. My heart stopped for a second. A voicemail appeared. I pressed play. Hello, this is Coulter and Reeves Legal. We received your inquiry. Please call back tomorrow morning. Thank you. The message ended, but I didn't move. Grandpa's letter lay open under the dim kitchen light. His words looked heavier now. Final. The truth wasn't buried with him. It was redirected. The drive from Dallas up to Wichita Falls felt like a full turn of the dial. The sky had shifted from gold to a soft gray. Downtown melted into dusty highways, and by the time I pulled into Grandpa's old driveway, the air smelled of cedar and longing. The house stood as it always had, quiet, unchanged, untouched since his passing. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The door creaked, and I felt a shift, like the building exhaled after holding its breath too long. The wallpaper faded. The carpets worn. But the label on his mahogany file cabinet remained bright, Trust plus Legacy. I'd come for a photo album, he promised. I found instead a folder stamped Private Everett Kincaid. Inside, typed memos to Raymond Coulter, handwritten post-its, don't trust the obvious. My heart hammered. This was more than nostalgia. This was evidence. Moments later, Mrs. Patterson, the old housekeeper, appeared at the doorway. I thought she'd retired. She cleared her throat, pulled a chair beside me, and let loose secrets. Mr. Everett told me things weren't right. I heard the meeting where your brother asked to rewrite the trust. The words landed heavy. 2 weeks before the funeral. A plan changed. I asked when, how, what I should know. She answered in small pauses. He said you deserved it, but someone changed the plan. And just like that, I was no longer unsure. I was certain. Sitting in my car under the streetlight, I laid out the folder, the photocopies, my son's medical bills, Grandpa's message, for Bodie, if I can't help. Dates. Names. Silence. Betrayal. I whispered to his photo on the dashboard, you're not forgotten. Rage met clarity. They made choices, and I chose to no longer wait. That night, lying awake, I stared at the ceiling. My father's voice echoed, we're not made of money. But here was proof they were. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I began typing, Raymond Coulter, Houston. I need proof of revision. My grandfather included me. Courage isn't loud. It's persistent. I edged forward. Prepared. While they slept in comfort, I stirred in purpose. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text, stop digging or you'll regret what you uncover. I exhaled. Game on. I woke up with the envelope still sitting on the kitchen table like it hadn't stopped watching me all night. The city outside was just starting to stretch, delivery trucks, distant horns, morning light trying to break through clouds. But inside, it was still dark. Still heavy. The folder sat open. I hadn't even moved it. My phone buzzed. Bodie. His voice, sleepy but hopeful, asked, Mom, will they help now? I paused. Measured. Yes, baby. We're working on it. Truth felt slippery in my mouth, but he needed steady ground. I got dressed slowly. Coffee. Shower. Silence. And then my eyes landed on something I hadn't looked at in a long time, the small velvet box on my dresser. The wedding band I gave up to cover one of Bodie's blood tests. Back then, I told myself it was temporary. A sacrifice, not a loss. But now? It wasn't about what it cost, it was about what it meant. I picked it up, let it sit in my palm a moment. Then slid it back on my finger. Not as a memory. As a promise. By mid-morning, I was parked outside Grandpa Everett's old house again. But this time, I crossed the street and knocked on the faded green door of Mrs. Carter's home. She'd been the neighborhood constant, always trimming her hedges, always watching. She opened the door, didn't look surprised. Just nodded and stepped aside. Her house smelled like chamomile tea and wood polish. She sat me down, poured 2 cups, and started talking before I even asked. You know, I remember you carrying the trash out after family dinners. Nobody else offered. You never asked for much. I didn't know how to answer. I stared into my cup. She kept going. You were the one he carried on his shoulders, you know. Even when you got too tall. The others stopped noticing, but he didn't. That man saw you. Something caught in my throat. All I could say was, why didn't anyone say anything? She looked me straight in the eye. Because truth's uncomfortable in nice dining rooms. But I saw it. All of it. Before I left, she pointed at the band on my hand. That tells more than what's being said here. I froze. She didn't know the story, but she felt it. Back in the car, I opened the folder again. Notes, memos, copies, pieces of something bigger. I called Maris. I need your help. I want to put this all together. Chronology. Proof. Everything. Her answer was quiet, solid. Tell me where to start. I started listing tasks out loud to myself. Call the Houston attorney. Pull Bodie's treatment history. Visit the bank where Grandpa's safety deposit box was registered. I wasn't just following breadcrumbs anymore. I was drawing a map. I looked at the ring again, then whispered, "You don't lose things. You get pushed to give them up. Now I want mine back." Afternoon light turned everything gold as I sat in the bank's parking lot. I fixed my jacket, ran my fingers over Bodie's photo inside my bag. Looked up at the mirrored glass doors. My reflection stared back, still me, just standing straighter now. I slipped the ring off one last time, tucked it into my pocket. Not out of shame, but as a reminder. I walked through the doors. Didn't flinch when the text came again, back off. You're not ready for what's inside. I let it buzz. At the vault, the manager waved me in. Ms. Kincaid? I turned. He was holding a thick file, name tagged with my grandfather's handwriting. My phone lit up before sunrise. A message from Maris. Did you see the group chat? Half awake, I rubbed my eyes and opened the family thread. A post blinked at the bottom, fresh, ugly, and meant for someone else. Again begging for charity? Please. It came from my cousin's wife, the one who once sent a teddy bear for Bodie with no card. I stared at it, heart lodged in my throat, as the rest of my body sat frozen. Outside, the world was stretching into another day, but inside I was clenched tight. My son's face flashed through my mind when the doctor told us the treatment wasn't the issue, the money was. That was the moment his face changed, like he aged 5 years. He didn't cry. He didn't even blink. He just nodded and asked if we could go home. Now, sitting on the window ledge, the echo of that night hung around me. The help that never came. The silence that was never broken. I picked up my phone and texted myself, "Today I respond." I dressed with purpose. Not for them. For Bodie. I grabbed the folder and envelope. And I walked out the door. A few mornings before, I was pacing the ER hallway. Bodie had collapsed again. His oxygen had dipped, and no one could explain why. Maris found me near the vending machine, coffee in one hand, chart in the other. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her face drawn. He's stable. For now. But insurance won't stretch that far again. She didn't ask me to beg. She didn't offer pity. Just facts. I nodded and said thank you, but in my head, something shifted. No more scrambling. No more polite silence. I went home that night and lined up the lab results, the bills, Soren's email about the family meeting. The math wasn't emotional, it was simple. The money existed. It just wasn't meant for us. Not in their eyes. At lunch the next day, while at a small deli near my apartment, my phone buzzed again. A screenshot from Maris. My hand trembled as I opened it. Another message from the family chat. But this one wasn't sent privately, it was posted for everyone to see. Let the charity case beg again tomorrow. Glad we locked the estate early. Soren's name was at the top. No hiding behind anyone else. No room for excuses. I saved the screenshot. The timestamp. The username. Then I just sat there. People walked by, chewing, talking, living. But I wasn't in the room anymore. I was inside that thread, staring at the words like they were etched into my skin. I muttered to myself, not out of rage, but clarity. Evidence doesn't scream. It whispers. I'll let it speak. Back at the cafe, I opened my laptop. The table by the window had just enough sunlight and just enough distance from the world. I uploaded everything, photos of the memo, chat screenshots, Bodhi's reports. I labeled each file like they mattered. Because they did. Then I called a legal aid clinic and said the words I used to be afraid of, I need help. I have documentation. I have a child who's sick. I'm ready to move. I made a checklist next. Email Raymond Coulter, request access to trust documents. Set up a formal affidavit with Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Carter. Craft the email, my grandfather created this trust for medical purposes related to my son. Book another vault appointment. Each task felt like a stone I was laying down under my feet. I wasn't sinking anymore, I was building ground. By evening, I was home again. The sky outside faded to that dusty blue Texas gets when it's between storms. I called Bodhi, his voice full of cartoons and cereal crunching. Mom's working for us now, I said. Are they gonna help this time? They will. He didn't ask how I knew. He just said, thanks, Mom. I looked around the apartment. Not big, not new. But filled with choices I made. Choices that kept us going. I grabbed Grandpa's photo from the drawer and placed it on Bodhi's shelf, next to his toy fire truck. Two kinds of hope. One from the past. One I was shaping now. Then my phone rang. A Texas number. I didn't recognize it, but I didn't hesitate. This is Quentin Kincaid. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. My office. I answered before he could finish. Fine. I'll be there. The vault door hissed as it unsealed. A dull metallic click, followed by the cold pressurized air spilling out like a hell breath finally released. I stepped in with slow, even steps. The room was quiet, like a tomb, lined with numbered drawers and silent metal walls that had seen more secrets than people. The banker didn't speak. He handed me a clipboard and gestured toward the box with E. Kincaid, Legacy Trust engraved in faded brass. I pulled the drawer open. Inside lay a thick envelope and a small black hard drive wrapped in an old microfiber cloth. My grandfather's handwriting still visible, for AK. Only. The weight of it settled in my hand, heavier than it should have been. For years, I'd been told I wasn't meant for any of this. Not included. Not considered. But here I was, holding proof that he thought otherwise. That maybe, in the quiet of his last days, he tried to make it right in the only way he could. Across the street at the cafe, I plugged the hard drive into my phone, using an adapter I had stashed in my purse for emergencies. This counted. The files loaded slowly. Then video. The first clip was grainy but clear, my grandfather sitting beside his attorney. His voice low, deliberate. "This fund," he said, "is for Bodhi. No one else touches it." Another video, Soren. Entering the study, glancing around, closing the door behind him. His voice, faint but audible, "Can we finalize this today?" The lawyer replied, "Yes, we just need her to sign." I paused the clip. Her was me. And I never saw a single sheet of paper. The rest of the files were dated. Organized. Almost like Grandpa knew someone would try to erase the truth. I scrolled through timestamps and cross-referenced each with moments I'd been deliberately kept out. The trust. The hospital bills. The missed calls. They weren't coincidences. They were strategy. And now, so was I. I drove toward the family ranch. The long road was flanked by brittle fences and dry brush. The truck engine hummed steady, my fingers wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. In the back seat, Bodhi napped, arms curled around a worn blanket. His small chest rose and fell with the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. They wanted me gone. Not angry. Not loud. Just gone. But I was coming back to the same house where they toasted over steak dinners and made decisions like I was invisible. I wasn't invisible anymore. I had footage. I had documents. I had names. And I had my son's breath behind me. The library smelled the same, aged paper, old polish, and lies soaked into the furniture. Soren stood by the fireplace, nursing a glass of something dark. My mother perched stiffly on the couch. My father leaned near the bookshelf, arms crossed like he'd already decided how this ended. Soren smiled without warmth. "Before we start, there's something you should know. You aren't listed as a Kincaid heir." My mother didn't even blink. "And we never signed those adoption papers for Bodhi." My pulse pounded. Not fast. Deep. I stared at them. Not one apology. Just bureaucracy dressed up as cruelty. I walked forward, opened my bag, and set the hard drive down on the table along with the thick envelope. "Then let's talk about what Grandpa signed." Soren flinched. My father's jaw twitched. My mother clutched a photo of us when I was 10. She didn't look up. I didn't need them to. I brought proof. Not for your approval. For accountability. No one spoke. I leaned in. "You'll withdraw the assets. Release the trust. Or I take this public." My phone was already open. The email drafted. One click away. I pressed send without breaking eye contact. The message went to Coulter, the press, and Maris. The silence cracked. One by one, my phone lit up. Seen. 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 My mother whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Soren stepped back. My father walked toward the window. They all shifted, searching for control. But it wasn't theirs anymore. I turned to leave. The sun was fading now, burning behind the trees that lined the property edge. I could feel it warming the back of my neck as I stepped outside. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. From Soren. "We meet at dawn. Don't think this is over." By late morning, the estate's conference room was already humming with tension. Long shadows from the tall windows sliced across the polished wood table. That table had hosted years of power plays, deals, secrets, legacy decisions. Today, I brought something different. My grandfather's framed photo sat at the far end, slightly tilted, like he was listening. Soren stood near the head, arms crossed. Quentin leaned back in a leather chair like this was just another meeting. Emerald whispered something to her husband, glancing nervously at the flash drive in my hand. I walked to the front of the room, set the envelope down, plugged in the hard drive. My voice didn't shake. Let's begin. I clicked the laptop connected to the projector. The first image flickered, a still frame of Soren entering the house the night before the funeral, briefcase in hand. The timestamp glowed clear. A hush fell across the room. The next clip played. Soren again, this time in the hallway outside Grandpa's study, after midnight. He opened the door, stepped inside, re-emerged minutes later, clutching the same briefcase. I paused the video. This was the night the trust documents were finalized. Hours before his death. Quentin sat upright. Emerald looked away. I didn't explain further. Let the silence speak. My fingers grazed the edge of my bag, Bodhi's photo tucked inside, unseen by them but close to me. Always. A notification pinged. I answered the incoming video call. Raymond Coulter appeared on screen. His tone was sharp. Miss Kincaid, we uncovered a personal journal your grandfather left, never filed through court, likely kept out intentionally. I held up the worn leather notebook, aged and cracked at the seams. I opened to a page marked with a folded corner. For Avery and Bodhi, it read. The truth must live on. Let blind greed not rob the child of his life. Soren scoffed. Seriously? You're going to use his scribbles? I looked straight at him. This is more honesty than you've ever shown. He shifted in his seat. My mother stared at the words as if seeing them burned her. My father stared at the table. I'm not asking for opinions, I continued. I'm stating facts. And I'm stating terms. I laid them out, clean and clear. The trust would activate within 30 days. The names of the advisors and changes made posthumously would be made public. Any resistance, any obstruction, would trigger the immediate release of everything, the footage, the journal, the paper trail. To the press, to advocacy groups, to court. Coulter nodded slowly on screen. I saw Soren's jaw tighten. Quentin mumbled something to my mother, and I caught a whisper, damage control. I leaned forward, voice calm. The clock starts now. No yelling. No threats. Just clarity and consequences. I stood tall. Not waiting for permission. Not bracing for backlash. I glanced around the room. These people once made me feel small. But that was before I learned to stop asking for a seat and started claiming my space. Bodhi's photo buzzed with a message in my pocket. You're not helpless anymore, I thought. You never were. I rose, placed the notebook back in my bag. This meeting is over. Not a single person stood to stop me as I walked to the door. My heels echoed off the hardwood floor like punctuation marks. Each step, deliberate. Outside, the wind was warm, rustling through the trees along the drive. I reached my car just as my phone buzzed again. Email notification. Confidential, new trust agreement amendment attached. I opened it. The envelope was thick, official, marked with the estate seal. I sat at the kitchen counter, fingers still damp from washing a dish I'd forgotten in the sink. The morning light cut through the blinds in quiet slats. I opened the envelope slowly, not out of fear, just finality. Every term I'd demanded was there. Signed. Stamped. Accepted. A statement clipped to the front read, "For the benefit of Bodie Kincaid, per Avery Kincaid's rightful request." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat there, tea gone lukewarm in front of me, letting the silence be what it was, whole. No tension. No second guessing. Just quiet. And truth. Outside, the same patch of sidewalk I'd looked at for years stretched across the same cracked concrete. But it felt different now. Later that day, a second envelope showed up. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized Lena's neat script. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. Inside was a short note. He told me to keep this, in case you ever needed help. There was a key. A storage code. No ceremony. No hint. Just that. I didn't tell anyone, not even Maris. I drove out alone, across the dusty edge of town. Found the unit. Rolled up the door. Inside was a single cedar box, Bodie's name engraved across the lid. I opened it. Savings bonds. Old stocks. Documents from companies that had long since gone public. And a letter. Grandpa's handwriting, slanted and sharp. This was my true legacy for him. Not wealth. Not name. But protection. If this box finds you, it means you kept going. That means more than anything. I read it twice. And whispered to no one, he never stopped watching out for us. Not really. 2 weeks later, I took Bodie to the botanical gardens. The air had changed. Autumn was arriving, slipping in like an old friend you forgot how much you missed. Bodie kicked at leaves, twirled in circles, picked up a stick he said was magical. He pointed at a tree. That one's mine. I nodded. Let's make it official. We had a copper tag made. Engraved, Bodie's Tree of Life, 2025. He squatted beside it, tracing the letters. Are we rich now? He asked. I knelt beside him, pulling him close. No, baby. We're safe now. That's better. That evening, back home, I opened my journal. First time in years. Pages yellowed. Lines blank. I wrote, I thought I needed their love to validate mine. But I never did. I paused, listening to the wind outside. Leaves against the glass. No fear in it anymore. Then I finished the page. I believed I was broken. I wasn't. I was bending. Avery, mother, survivor, whole. I tucked the journal away. Not to hide it, just to make space on the shelf. Later that night, while sorting through Grandpa's documents to archive, a contact card slipped loose. A foundation name I didn't recognize. Below it, Children's Aid Collective, Confidential Support Fund, Active Donor, E. Kincaid. I looked it up. Still active. Still taking calls. I sent a message. Just a short one, Avery Kincaid, reaching out on behalf of Everett. Hours later, a reply. We've been waiting to hear from the Kincaid family for years. We'd love to talk about continuing his legacy with you. I sat back, phone still glowing in my hand. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was where it really began. That night, after Bodie brushed his teeth and lined his stuffed animals across the bed, I tucked him in like always. Kissed his forehead. Smoothed his hair. Just as I turned to leave, he whispered, Mom, when I grow up, I'll protect you too. My breath caught. Not from pain, but from pride.